The alien ship floated in the darkness of space, hidden from human eyes. It was big and silver, shaped like a giant teardrop. Inside the ship, strange creatures moved around quietly. They had purple skin and 4 eyes each. Long tentacles grew from their heads instead of hair. These were the Zeltharians, and they had come to watch the humans. Dr. Kexler stood in front of a large screen. His tentacles moved slowly as he thought. He was the leader of this mission. For 3 years, he had been studying the humans who lived on the small moon called New Haven. The humans had built a mining town there. They dug rocks and metals from the ground and sent them back to Earth. "The humans are fighting again," said Valana. She was younger than Kexler and had bright green spots on her purple skin. Her 4 eyes were all looking at the screen. "They are in their drinking place." Kexler moved closer to the screen. "Good. Turn on the recording machine. No. We need to see how violent they really are." The Zeltharians had read many reports about humans. All the reports said the same thing. Humans were dangerous. They solved problems by fighting, were wild, and could not control themselves. The Galactic Council, which ruled over many planets, had warned everyone about humans. They said humans were too violent to be trusted. The Zeltharians were different. They had stopped fighting long ago. Their people had learned to talk through problems instead of using violence. They thought fighting was stupid and wrong. But they were curious about humans. Could such violent creatures build spaceships and travel to other worlds? "Look at them," Valana said, pointing at the screen.
So many humans in one small room.
"They're drinking that liquid that makes them act strange." The screen showed the inside of Murphy's cantina. It was a simple bar with wooden tables and chairs. The walls were made of metal sheets. Bright lights hung from the ceiling. About 30 humans sat around the room. They were drinking beer and talking loudly. Most of the humans were men, but there were some women too. They all wore work clothes that were dirty from their jobs. Some worked in the mines. Others moved cargo from ship to ship. Few were pilots, who flew between the moon and other places. Behind the bar stood Jake Murphy. He was a big man with gray hair and a thick beard. His arms were strong from years of work. He owned the cantina and served drinks to the workers. Jake knew everyone who came to his place. He watched them carefully to make sure they did not cause too much trouble. "The humans look calm now," said another Zeltharian scientist. "But the reports say they can become violent very quickly." Kexler nodded. "Yes, they are like wild animals. They seem peaceful, but then they attack without warning. That is why we must study them from far away." The Zeltharians had special machines that could see and hear everything in the cantina. The humans did not know they were being watched. The aliens had been observing different human settlements for months. They saw humans fight over small things. They saw them argue about money and work. They saw them get angry when they drank too much alcohol. "Why do they gather in groups like this?" asked Valana. "If they are so violent, why do they not avoid each other?" "It is a mystery," Kexler replied. "Perhaps they enjoy the violence. Perhaps fighting is how they show strength to each other." On the screen, the humans continued to drink and talk. Some played card games at small tables. Others told stories about their work. A few sang songs together. The atmosphere seemed friendly, but the Zeltharians knew this could change quickly. Jake Murphy moved around the bar, filling glasses with beer and cleaning tables. He smiled at his customers and joked with them, but his eyes were always watching. He had been running the cantina for 5 years. He knew how to spot trouble before it started. "A big human behind the bar," said Valana. "He seems to be the leader," agreed Kexler. "He is probably the strongest fighter." That is how humans choose their leaders. The Zeltharians did not understand human culture at all. They thought humans were simple creatures who only cared about fighting and being strong. They believed that human society was built on fear and violence. The idea that humans could be kind or gentle seemed impossible to them. At one table, a group of miners played cards. They laughed and joked as they played. At another table, cargo workers shared stories about their trips to different planets. Near the bar, a woman pilot talked to Jake about her next job. "They seem almost civilized," said Valana quietly. Kexther's tentacles moved sharply. Do not be fooled. The reports are very clear. Humans are violent by nature. They cannot help themselves. Soon we will see their true behavior. The Zeltharians waited and watched. They had seen humans fight before, but always from recordings made by spy devices. This was the first time they could watch a human fight happen in real time. They were excited to gather new data about human violence. Movement at table 7, reported a technician. 2 humans are standing up. Their body language suggests conflict. Kexther focused all his attention on the screen. Here it comes. The savage behavior we have been waiting to see. But the Zeltharians had no idea what they were really about to witness. They thought they understood humans, but they were completely wrong. The fight they were about to see would change everything they believed about the human race. The cantina was about to become a classroom, okay? And the Zeltharians were about to learn that sometimes the most important lessons come from watching ordinary people do ordinary things. The trouble started at the card table in the corner. Carlos Mendez sat with 3 other men playing a game called poker. Carlos was a cargo hauler who moved supplies between ships. He was 28 years old and had short black hair. His hands were rough from working with heavy boxes all day. People said Carlos had a quick temper, but he was usually a good worker. Across from Carlos sat Pete Harrison. Pete was 52 years old and had been working the mines for most of his life. His hair was gray, and his face had lines from years of hard work. His hands were covered in small scars from handling mining tools. Pete was quiet most of the time, but everyone respected him. He had been on New Haven longer than almost anyone else. The other 2 men at the table were Roy Kim and Danny Walsh. Roy worked on the loading docks. Danny fixed broken machines in the mines. They were just playing cards for fun in small amounts. Of money, I call, said Pete, putting some credits on the table. Credits were the money that people used on New Haven. What do you have, Carlos? Carlos looked at his cards again. He had been losing money all night. This was his last chance to win some back. 2 pair. Kings and 8s. Pete smiled and laid down his cards. Full house, aces over 7s. Roy and Danny whistled softly. It was a very good hand. Pete reached forward to collect all the credits on the table. Carlos watched the money disappear into Pete's pile. Wait, Carlos said loudly. His voice was angry. Show me those cards again. Pete looked surprised. What do you mean? Want to see those cards up close? Carlos stood up from his chair. The legs scraped loudly against the floor. Several people in the cantina turned to look. Up on their ship, the Zeltharians moved closer to their screen. Conflict is beginning, said Valana. Her 4 eyes were bright with excitement. The younger human is challenging the older one. Kexther adjusted the recording equipment. Perfect. This will show exactly how violent humans really are. Back in the cantina, Pete slowly picked up his cards and showed them to Carlos. There, you can count them if you want. Carlos looked at the cards carefully. There were 5 cards, just like there should be. 3 aces and 2 7s. It was a legal hand, but Carlos was angry about losing his money. He had bills to pay, and his ship needed repairs. Nobody gets hands that good 3 times in one night, Carlos said. His voice was getting louder. Nobody is that lucky. And the cantina was getting quiet. People stopped their conversations to watch what was happening. Jake Murphy looked up from behind the bar. He had seen this kind of situation many times before. Pete put the cards down on the table. Carlos, I have been playing cards since before you were born. I know how to play fair. That is what a cheater would say, Carlos replied. His hands were on his hips. His face was red with anger. Are you calling me a cheater? Pete asked. His voice was still calm, but there was something cold in his eyes. The Zeltharians were watching every movement. Notice how the older human remains. Seated, said Kexther. He is trying to appear non-threatening before he attacks. The younger one is clearly the aggressor, added Valana. His body language shows classic pre-violence behavior. Carlos pointed his finger at Pete. I am calling you exactly what you are, old man. A cheater who takes money from honest workers. People around the cantina were paying attention now. Some stood up to get a better view. Others moved their chairs back to give the two men more space. But nobody left. Everyone knew that something was about to happen. Pete slowly stood up from his chair. He was taller than Carlos and had broader shoulders, even though he was older. Years of mining work had kept him strong. "Son, I've been playing cards in this cantina for 5 years. Ask anyone here.
I
Play fair." "Maybe you have been cheating for 5 years," Carlos shot back. Jake Murphy started walking toward their table. He moved slowly and kept his hands where everyone could see them. "Boys, let us all calm down here. Stay out of this, Jake," Carlos said, without looking away from Pete. "This is between me and the cheater." Pete took a deep breath. The Zeltharians expected him to get angry. They expected him to start shouting or throw something. Instead, Pete reached into his pocket and pulled out half of the credits he had won. "Look, Carlos," Pete said in a quiet voice. "I did not cheat, but you seem upset about losing your money. Here, take half of what I won tonight. That should cover what you lost." Pete held out the credits toward Carlos. His hand was steady, and his face looked sincere. Everyone in the cantina stared in surprise. The Zeltharians were confused. "What is the older human doing?" asked Valana. "Why is he giving away his winnings?" "I do not understand," said Kexter. "This behavior does not match any of our reports." Carlos looked at the credits in Pete's hand. For a moment, his anger seemed to fade. The money would help him pay his bills. Pete was being generous, even though Carlos had called him a cheater. But then Carlos thought about all the other workers who might be watching. If he took the money, people might think he was weak. They might think he could be pushed around. His pride would not let him back down. "I do not want your guilt money," Carlos said. He pushed Pete's hand away. "I want you to admit that you cheated." Put the credits back in his pocket. "I cannot admit to something I did not do." The two men stared at each other. The cantina was completely silent now. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. Jake Murphy was still walking toward them, but he was moving slowly. He did not want to make things worse. Carlos felt his anger growing again. He had given Pete a chance to make things right. But the old man was too stubborn. "Then I guess we have a problem." "I guess we do," Pete replied sadly. Carlos made his choice. He pulled back his right hand and swung it hard at Pete's face. Carlos's fist hit Pete right on the jaw. The sound was loud in the quiet cantina. Pete stumbled backward and crashed into another table. Cards and drinks went flying everywhere. The table broke and Pete fell to the floor with pieces of wood around. "Now we see their true nature," said Valana on the alien ship. She was excited to finally witness human violence. This will be chaos. But something strange happened. Instead of everyone starting to fight, the other humans in the cantina did something different. They all stood up and moved their chairs back. But they did not run away. They did not join the fight. They made a big circle around Pete and Carlos. Jake Murphy ran to the bar and reached under it. The Zeltharians thought he would pull out a weapon. All their reports said humans used weapons when they fought. But Jake pulled out a small brass bell instead. Jake rang the bell 2 times. The sound was clear and loud. "Fair fight rules." Jake shouted so everyone could hear. "No weapons, no ganging up, no permanent damage." The Zeltharians stared at their screen in confusion. "What is happening?" asked Kexter. "Why are the other humans not fighting?" "I do not understand," said Valana. "The report said humans fight in groups. They said human violence spreads like fire." Pete got up from the broken table, touched his jaw where Carlos had hit him. There was a small cut on his lip, and it was bleeding. He wiped the blood away with his hand. Then he looked at Carlos and raised both his fists. "All right, Carlos," Pete said. "You want to do this the hard way?" The circle of humans made more room. Roy Kim and Danny Walsh moved the broken table pieces out of the way. Lisa Chen, a cargo pilot with short brown hair, climbed on a chair to see better, but nobody tried to stop the fight. Nobody called for help. They all just watched and waited. Carlos raised his fists, too. Both men started moving in a circle, looking at each other carefully. Carlos was younger and faster. Pete was older, but stronger and more experienced. This makes no sense, Kexler said. His tentacles were moving quickly, which meant he was very confused. Where's the berserker rage? Where's the uncontrolled brutality? Carlos threw another punch, but Pete blocked it with his arm. Pete punched back, but Carlos ducked, and the punch missed. They kept moving around each other like dancers. The humans watching the fight were not screaming or cheering for blood. Some of them were giving quiet advice. "Keep your guard up, Pete," said one miner. "Watch his left hand," Carlos said another. Carlos tried to punch Pete in the stomach, but Pete caught his arm and pushed him away. Carlos stumbled, but did not fall. He smiled and nodded at Pete. "Good move, old man." Pete smiled back, even though his lip was still bleeding. "You are faster than I thought, kid." Then they started fighting again. Carlos landed a punch on Pete's shoulder. Pete grabbed Carlos, and they wrestled for a few seconds before breaking apart. Neither man was trying to really hurt the other. They were fighting, but it was controlled fighting. "They are following rules," said a young Zeltharian scientist. "But look at their behavior. When one falls, the other waits for him to get up." It was true. When Carlos slipped on some spilled beer, Pete stepped back and waited. When Pete got pushed against the bar, Carlos gave him room to move away. They were fighting hard, but they were also being fair. Jake Murphy watched the fight carefully. He had seen many fights in his cantina. Some fights were angry and dangerous. Those fights he stopped quickly. But this fight was different. Pete and Carlos were working out their problem in an honest way. The fight went on for several minutes. Both men were breathing hard and sweating. Carlos had a red mark on his cheek where Pete had hit him. Pete had a bruised eye, and his lip was still bleeding. "Time," Jake called out. Both men stopped fighting and looked at him. "Water break." "Denny." Walsh brought 2 glasses of water. Pete and Carlos drank gratefully. They were still standing in the fighting circle, but now they were talking to each other. "You hit harder than you look," Carlos said to Pete. "You are tougher than I expected," Pete replied. The Zeltharians could not believe what they were seeing. "They are complimenting each other," said Valana. "During a fight, they are saying nice things." "This violates everything we know about human combat behavior," said Kexler. "They should be trying to kill each other." After the water break, Pete and Carlos started fighting again. But now they were both getting tired. Their punches were slower, and they were making mistakes. Carlos tried to grab Pete, but Pete twisted away, and Carlos almost fell down. Pete saw his chance. Could have hit Carlos while he was off balance. But instead, Pete waited for Carlos to get steady again. "Ready?" Pete asked. "Ready," Carlos answered. They fought for a few more minutes. Finally, Carlos got lucky. He threw a punch that caught Pete right on the chin. Pete's eyes went wide, and he dropped to one knee. He was not badly hurt, but he was very tired. Carlos could have kept hitting Pete. The Zeltharians expected him to attack while Pete was down. But Carlos stepped back instead. "You had enough, old-timer?" Carlos asked. His voice was not mean anymore. He sounded concerned. Pete looked up at Carlos. His face was bruised and dirty, but he was smiling. "Yeah, I am done. Good fight, kid." Carlos reached down and helped Pete stand up. "Okay." The watching humans clapped their hands and cheered, not because someone got hurt, but because both men had fought with honor. Carlos helped Pete stand up. Both men were breathing hard and had bruises on their faces. But instead of being angry, they looked at each other with respect. Pete put his hand on Carlos's shoulder. "That was a good fight," Pete said. He was smiling even though his lip was swollen. "You pack a punch for a young guy." "Sorry about your lip, Pete," Carlos said. He looked embarrassed now that the fight was over. "I should not have called you a cheater." The Zeltharians on their ship were completely shocked. "What is happening?" Valana asked. Her 4 eyes were wide with confusion. "The fight is over, but no one is dead. No one is even badly hurt." "This cannot be right," said Kexler. His tentacles were moving in circles, which meant he was very upset. The report said humans fight to the death. They said human violence never stops until someone is destroyed. Back in the cantina, Jake Murphy came over with a medical kit. It was a small box with bandages and healing gel. I'd learned to treat minor injuries from his years running the cantina. Let me look at that lip, Pete, Jake said. He cleaned the cut with a soft cloth and put some healing gel on it. The gel would help it heal faster and prevent infection. Then Jake looked at Carlos. You have a nice bruise forming on your cheek, son. Want some ice for that? That would be good, Carlos said.
Thanks, Jake.
Jake got some ice from behind the bar and wrapped it in a towel. Carlos held it against his bruised cheek. The cold felt good and would keep the swelling down. The other humans in the cantina were cleaning up the mess from the fight. Roy Kim and Danny Walsh picked up the broken pieces of the table. Lisa Chen helped mop up the spilled beer. Everyone worked together without being asked. Look at this behavior, said another Zeltharian scientist on the ship. They are cooperating. After violence, they are helping each other. It makes no sense, Kexther replied. Violence should create more violence. Conflict should divide them. But the humans were not divided at all. In fact, they seemed closer than before. Many people came over to talk to Pete and Carlos. They wanted to tell them it was a good fight. Nice job, Pete said. A miner named Frank. You showed that young hothead how it is done. Carlos fought well too, Pete said quickly. He is stronger than he looks. Mary Santos, who worked in the communication center, brought both men fresh beers. On the house, she said with a smile. That was entertaining. Carlos took the beer gratefully. Thanks, Mary. I needed that. Pete sat down at a clean table, and Carlos sat across from him. They drank their beer and talked like old friends. All the anger from before was completely gone. I really did not cheat, Pete said quietly. I know you were just frustrated about losing your money. I know, Carlos replied. I was being stupid. I've been having money problems lately, and I took it out on you. Money problems? Pete asked. What kind of problems? Carlos looked embarrassed. My cargo ship needs new engine parts. It costs a lot of credits. I was hoping to win some money tonight to help pay for them. Pete thought for a moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out all the credits he had won that night. He pushed them across the table to Carlos. Here, take these. Carlos stared at the money. I cannot take that. You won it fair. Consider it a loan, Pete said. Pay me back when you can. But why would you help me? Carlos asked. I called you a cheater. I hit you in the face. Pete shrugged. We settled that with a fight. Now we start fresh. The Zeltharians were recording everything, but they could not understand what they were seeing. The older human is giving money to the younger human, Valana said. The same human who attacked him? Perhaps it is tribute, suggested Kexther. Maybe the older human is paying to avoid future violence. But that did not explain what happened next. Carlos pushed half the credits back to Pete. If you're going to help me, we share it equally. Partners should be equal. Partners? Pete asked. Well, we both work with cargo, Carlos said. Maybe we could work together sometimes. Your experience and my energy. Pete smiled and shook Carlos's hand. I would like that. Lisa Chen came over to their table. She was a pretty woman, with short black hair and smart eyes. She flew cargo ships between New Haven and other planets. You boys work all that anger out of your systems? She asked. Yeah, Carlos said, touching his bruised cheek. Just needed to settle things properly. Good, Lisa said. She sat down at their table. Because I have a job that might interest both of you. Big cargo run to the Jupiter colonies. Needs two experienced guys. What kind of cargo? Pete asked. Mining equipment? Heavy stuff? It pays very well. Carlos looked at Pete. What do you think, partner? I think it sounds perfect, Pete replied. Soon, other people joined them at the table. Roy Kim told stories about his work on the loading docks. Danny Walsh explained how he fixed broken mining robots. Frank the miner talked about finding a new vein of valuable ore. The cantina was back to normal, but something had changed. People were talking and laughing more than before. The fight had not divided them. Instead, it had brought them together. Jake Murphy watched from behind the bar. He had seen this happen many times. Sometimes people needed to fight to understand each other. It was strange, but it worked. Another round for everyone, Jake announced. First drink is free tonight. The humans cheered and raised their glasses. Pete and Carlos clinked their beers together and smiled. 2 hours ago, they had been enemies. Now they were partners and friends. The Zeltharians watched in amazement as the cantina filled with laughter and conversation. This was not the savage behavior they had expected to see. This was something completely different, and they had no idea what it meant. For the next 7 days, Kexther did not sleep. He watched the recording of the fight over and over again. His 4 eyes hurt from staring at the screen for so long. His tentacles moved nervously as he tried to understand what he had seen. It again, he told the computer. From the beginning, Alana was worried about her boss. Dr. Kexther, you have watched this recording 43 times. You need to rest. I cannot rest, Kexther replied. Nothing about this makes sense. Look at the data. He pointed to charts and numbers on his screen. Both humans had high stress levels when the fight started, but look what happened after the fight ended. Their stress went down. They became more relaxed, not more angry. Maybe our instruments are broken, suggested Villana. I checked them twice, Kexther said. The instruments are working perfectly. The humans really did become calmer after they fought. Kexther pulled up more data. He had been studying human behavior for months. Every time humans fought, the same thing happened. After the fight, they became friends. After conflict, they worked together better. Look at this recording from last month, Kexther said. He showed Villana a video of 2 human women arguing about work schedules. The argument became a physical fight. But the next day, the 2 women were working together and laughing. And this one from 2 months ago, Kexther continued. He showed another video of human men fighting over a card game. The fight ended with handshakes and shared drinks. I have 137 recordings of human fights, Kexther said. In every single case, the humans became closer. After fighting, they did not become enemies, became friends. Villana looked at the data carefully. But the Galactic Council reports say humans are violent savages. The Galactic Council is wrong, Kexther said quietly. We have all been wrong about humans. Kexther called a meeting with his entire research team. 12 Zeltharian scientists gathered in the main room of their ship. Kexther stood in front of a big screen showing graphs and charts. What we thought? We knew about humans is completely incorrect, he began. They're not mindless brutes. They are not uncontrolled savages. They have a complex social system that we never understood. He pointed to the screen. Human fighting is not about destruction. It is about communication. They use controlled violence to solve problems and build relationships. Dr. Mordick, an old scientist with white spots on his purple skin, shook his head. That is impossible. Violence destroys relationships. It does not build them. Not for humans. Kexther replied. Watch this. He played the recording of Pete and Carlos fighting, but this time he pointed out details that everyone had missed before. See how the other humans make a circle? They are not preparing to join the fight. They are making sure the fight stays fair. And listen to what the bar owner says. A fair fight. Rules. No weapons, no ganging up, no permanent damage. The scientists watched carefully. They have rules for fighting, said Villana, like we have rules for debate. Exactly, Kexther said. For Zeltharians, we solve conflicts by talking. For humans, they sometimes solve conflicts by fighting. But both methods have the same goal. Both methods end with understanding and agreement. He showed them more data. Look at their stress hormones. Look at their brain activity. During the fight, they are not filled with hate or rage. They are focused and controlled. After the fight, they feel relief and satisfaction. Like we feel after a good debate, said Dr. Mordick slowly. Yes, Kexther said. The fight between Pete and Carlos was not violence. It was negotiation. It was 2 humans working out their differences in their own way. The research team spent hours discussing the data. Slowly, they began to understand. Humans were not the monsters that everyone thought they were. They were just different. Think about it, said Villana. We Zeltharians evolved on a peaceful planet. We never needed to fight for survival. But humans evolved on a dangerous world. They had to fight to survive. So they learned to use fighting as a tool. They learned to control it, added another. Scientist. They made rules. They made it safe. They turned violence into something positive. Kexther nodded. Humans are not violent by nature. They are competitive by nature and want to test themselves against each other, but they do it in ways that make their society stronger, not weaker. Over the next few days, the research team prepared a new report. This report was very different from all the previous reports about humans. Instead of calling humans dangerous, it called them remarkable. Recommendation, Kexler wrote in the report: immediate diplomatic contact with human leadership. Classification change from hostile species to potential ally. But will the Galactic Council believe us? Asked Valana. They have to, Kexler replied. We have proof. We have data. We have video recordings. He looked at the screen showing Murphy's Cantina one more time. Pete and Carlos were sitting together, planning their new business partnership. Jake Murphy was serving drinks and telling jokes. Lisa Chen was showing pictures of her latest cargo run to other pilots. These humans are not our enemies, Kexler said. They might be our greatest allies. They have something we lost long ago. Is that? Asked Valana. Passion, Kexler replied. They care deeply about things. They're willing to fight for what they believe in. But they also know when to stop fighting and start building. The report was sent to the Galactic Council. 3 days later, it would take weeks for the council to read it and make a decision. But Kexler was confident. The truth was too clear to ignore. What do we do now? Asked Valana. Kexler smiled, which was unusual for a Zeltharian. Now we wait, and we keep watching, because I think we are about to see the galaxy change forever. In Murphy's Cantina, the humans continued their daily lives. They worked and played and argued and laughed. Sometimes they fought, and sometimes they made up. They had no idea that aliens were watching them. They had no idea that they're simple. Bar fight had changed everything. But soon, very soon, first contact would be made. And when it happened, it would not be between enemies. It would be between friends who had simply misunderstood each other.